The footsteps grew closer as Sarah maintained her shooting position, finger on the trigger while Kozlov stood framed in the window below. Her mind raced through options: abort the mission and risk losing the target forever, or trust her training and take the shot despite the approaching threat. Years of combat experience had taught her that hesitation kills more soldiers than enemy bullets. "Sarah?" The voice belonged to Linda Davis, the administrative assistant from her office. "Are you okay? I saw you heading this direction and wanted to check on your ankle." Sarah's blood turned to ice. Linda had somehow followed her trail through the forest, arriving at the worst possible moment. In 30 seconds, Kozlov would move away from the window, and the opportunity would be lost. But if Linda witnessed the shot, Sarah's cover would be blown, and her life as she knew it would be over. "I'm fine," Sarah called back softly, not moving from her position. "Just resting and enjoying the view. Head back to the group. I'll be along soon." But Linda kept approaching, her footsteps crackling through the underbrush. Through her scope, Sarah could see Kozlov examining an assault rifle while his buyers nodded appreciatively. Security cameras recorded everything for later distribution to terrorist networks around the world. The man who had supplied weapons for attacks on American civilians was 20 seconds away from completing another deadly transaction. "Sarah, what is that you're?" Linda's voice trailed off as she emerged from the trees and saw the rifle. Time slowed to a crawl as Sarah faced an impossible choice. Her mission parameters had been clear: maintain operational security at all costs. Linda's discovery of a sniper position overlooking a known arms dealer would trigger investigations that could unravel years of carefully constructed intelligence networks. But Sarah had never killed an innocent person, and she wasn't about to start with a colleague who had simply been trying to help. "Linda, listen to me very carefully," Sarah said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to life-or-death situations. "You need to get down on the ground right now and stay quiet. I'll explain everything later, but right now a lot of lives depend on what happens in the next 10 seconds. The transformation in Sarah's voice shocked Linda into immediate compliance. Gone was the mild-mannered accountant who ate lunch alone and rarely spoke in meetings. This was someone else entirely, someone who commanded instant obedience with the kind of presence that only came from real combat experience. Kozlov moved closer to the window as his demonstration reached its climax. Sarah's crosshairs tracked him perfectly while her breathing slowed to the rhythm she had learned in sniper school. Everything else faded away: Linda's shocked breathing behind her, the sound of wind through the trees, the distant voices from the compound below. The world contracted to a single point of focus where her bullet would intersect with its target. The trigger broke clean and smooth, just as it had hundreds of times during training and dozens of times in actual combat. The rifle's report echoed across the valley while Sarah maintained her sight picture, watching through her scope as Viktor Kozlov collapsed with a perfect center mass hit. The arms dealer who had caused so much death around the world would never sell another weapon. Chaos erupted in the compound below as security personnel scrambled to respond to the attack. Sarah was already breaking down her rifle with practiced efficiency, muscle memory taking over while her conscious mind processed the implications of Linda's presence. The mission was complete, but now she had to deal with a witness who could destroy everything she had built over the past 3 years. "Sarah, what the hell was that?" Linda whispered, her face pale with shock. "Who were you shooting at? What's going on?" "I need you to trust me," Sarah replied while packing her equipment. "The man I just shot was responsible for supplying weapons to terrorist groups. He's killed hundreds of innocent people by proxy, and today's deal would have resulted in more attacks on American civilians." Sarah's mind raced through possible explanations that might satisfy Linda without revealing classified information. She settled on a version of the truth that emphasized justice while omitting the intelligence community's involvement. "I used to be in the army," Sarah continued. "Special operations. When I found out that Kozlov was going to be here, I couldn't just let him walk away. Too many people have died because of his weapons." Linda stared at her colleague as if seeing her for the first time. The transformation was so complete that she struggled to reconcile the deadly efficient sniper with the quiet woman who had worked next to her for 3 years. Sarah stopped and turned to face her colleague directly. "Linda, I've never killed an innocent person, and I'm not going to start now. But I need you to understand something. What you witnessed today never happened. If word gets out about this, it won't just destroy my life. It will compromise ongoing operations and put other people in danger. The administrative assistant who had wanted to check on an injured colleague was struggling to process information that belonged in movies rather than real life. She had followed a simple trail through the forest and discovered that her mild-mannered coworker was actually some kind of government assassin. Nothing in her experience had prepared her for this situation. "Why should I trust you?" Linda asked. "How do I know you're really one of the good guys?" Sarah considered her options carefully. Too much information would compromise operational security, but too little might fail to convince Linda of the mission's legitimacy. She decided to share details that could be verified through public sources while omitting anything classified. Viktor Kozlov has been selling weapons to terrorist organizations for over a decade, Sarah explained as they continued through the forest. The FBI has been tracking him, but he's always stayed one step ahead of law enforcement. Today's operation prevented weapons sales that intelligence analysts believe would have resulted in attacks on American soil within the next 6 months. They reached the main trail system as Sarah's explanation continued. Her story emphasized Kozlov's criminal activities while portraying her own actions as those of a concerned veteran who couldn't stand by while innocent lives remained at risk. It was true, even if it wasn't the complete truth. Linda's questions gradually shifted from suspicion to curiosity as they hiked back toward the resort. She wanted to know about Sarah's military service, her training, and how someone with those skills had ended up working in accounting. Sarah answered carefully, sharing enough personal history to build trust while protecting information that could compromise her continued cover identity. "So you're really just going back to doing audits and tax returns after this?" Linda asked as the resort buildings came into view. "That was always the plan," Sarah replied. "Today was an exception, not a return to my old life." Viktor Kozlov was a special case, someone who needed to be stopped and wouldn't be stopped any other way. They emerged from the forest to find the hiking group already returning from their extended route. Brad Patterson was relieved to see Sarah moving normally, apparently recovered from her ankle injury. The timing was perfect. Their absence could be easily explained by Linda's decision to check on her injured colleague and help her navigate back to safety. "How's the ankle?" Patterson asked as they rejoined the group. "Much better," Sarah replied, maintaining her mild-mannered accountant persona even as adrenaline still coursed through her system. "Linda found me and helped me back. We took it slow, but I think I'll be fine by tomorrow." The group's attention quickly shifted to their own adventures and the evening's planned activities. No one noticed the meaningful look that passed between Sarah and Linda, or the way Linda remained unusually quiet during the walk back to the resort. The successful mission would be reported through classified channels, while the outside world remained completely unaware that justice had been served in the mountains. That evening's group dinner tested Sarah's acting abilities as never before. She sat with her usual colleagues, participating in conversations about the day's hiking adventures while her mind replayed every detail of the operation. The shot had been perfect, a clean hit that eliminated a high-value target without collateral damage. But Linda's discovery had created complications that would require careful management. After dinner, Linda approached Sarah privately. "I've been thinking about what happened today. I don't understand all of it, but I know you're not the person I thought you were." Sarah tensed, preparing for the conversation that would determine whether her cover identity survived or collapsed completely. "I looked up Viktor Kozlov on my phone," Linda continued. "The news is already reporting that an arms dealer was killed in what looks like a professional hit. The FBI is calling it a significant blow to international weapons trafficking." This was better than Sarah had hoped. Public reporting of Kozlov's death as a law enforcement victory would help legitimize her actions while providing Linda with verifiable evidence that the target was genuinely dangerous. "I'm not going to say anything," Linda said finally. "I don't pretend to understand government operations or whatever you're really involved in. But if stopping people like that is what you do, then I guess someone has to do it." Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she hadn't even realized she was carrying. Linda's acceptance meant her cover could remain intact while she returned to the quiet life she had built as an accountant. The mission was truly complete. "Thank you," Sarah said simply. "You've given me something I didn't expect to have after today." What's that? The chance to keep being boring. They shared a laugh that acknowledged the surreal nature of their situation. Tomorrow they would return to Seattle, where Sarah would resume her life as a mild-mannered accountant, while Linda went back to managing administrative tasks. The only difference would be the shared secret that connected them, and Linda's new understanding that some of her colleagues carried burdens far heavier than quarterly reports and tax deadlines. The bus ride home on Sunday was uneventful, filled with typical post-retreat conversations about team building and mountain adventures. Sarah sat in her usual spot near the back, appearing to read while actually processing the weekend's events. The mission had succeeded beyond all expectations, eliminating a significant threat while maintaining her cover identity for future operations. Her phone buzzed with a text message from the same unknown number that had started everything. Package delivered successfully. Account closed. Sarah deleted the message and returned her phone to her purse. Viktor Kozlov's death would reverberate through criminal networks around the world, disrupting planned attacks and forcing other arms dealers to reconsider their operational security. The mission's success had probably saved hundreds of lives, even though the world would never know exactly how or why. As the bus pulled into Seattle, Sarah reflected on the strange duality of her existence. To her colleagues, she remained the quiet accountant who preferred numbers to people. They had no idea that the woman adjusting her glasses and gathering her belongings was someone who had just eliminated one of the world's most dangerous arms dealers with a single perfectly placed shot. The transformation back to civilian life felt natural now, like putting on comfortable clothes after wearing a uniform. Sarah Chun, accountant, would return to her desk on Monday morning to continue working on audits and tax returns. But somewhere in the back of her mind, she would always be ready for the next message that might require her to become someone else entirely. Her colleagues filed off the bus, chatting about vacation photos and Monday's workload. Sarah followed at her usual pace, blending seamlessly back into the crowd of ordinary people living ordinary lives. None of them suspected that Justice sometimes wore glasses and carried a calculator instead of a rifle. The mission was over, but the legend was just beginning. In intelligence circles, whispered conversations would speak of an operation so clean and professional that it seemed impossible. A target eliminated with surgical precision by a ghost who appeared and disappeared without leaving any trace. They would never know that their mysterious sniper was currently reviewing quarterly reports and preparing for Tuesday's client meeting. Sarah Chun had proven that the deadliest weapons often hide in plain sight, disguised as accountants who eat lunch alone and never make waves. Her colleagues would continue seeing exactly what she wanted them to see: a quiet, unremarkable woman who preferred numbers to people. They had no idea she was a sniper, and after this weekend, they never would. The Morrison and Associates team arrived at Pine Ridge Mountain Resort on Thursday afternoon, their chartered bus winding through tree-lined roads toward what everyone believed would be a routine corporate retreat. Sarah sat near the back, appearing to read a financial magazine, while actually studying the terrain they passed. Every hill, every outcropping, every potential sight line was filed away in her tactical memory as she prepared for what lay ahead. The resort nestled in a valley surrounded by peaks that rose like natural watchtowers. Sarah noted several positions that would offer clear views of the compound where Viktor Kozlov would be conducting his arms deal. The intelligence report had been precise about the timing: Friday at 3:30 p.m., during a scheduled weapons demonstration for potential buyers. The afternoon sun would be at the perfect angle, providing optimal lighting while creating shadows that would conceal a sniper's position. Her colleagues chatted excitedly about the planned activities as they checked into their rooms. Team-building exercises, group dinners, and the much-discussed hiking expedition that would serve as Sarah's cover for the operation. She maintained her usual quiet demeanor, offering polite smiles and brief responses while her mind worked through the complex choreography required to complete her mission. Room assignments placed Sarah on the third floor with a view of the northern peaks. Perfect. From her window, she could see the ridgeline where she would need to position herself for the shot. The distance was approximately 2 miles as the crow flies, requiring a careful approach through dense forest to avoid detection by resort staff and other hikers. Sarah unpacked her belongings methodically, hanging her business clothes in the closet while concealing her tactical gear within seemingly innocent hiking equipment. That evening's welcome dinner tested Sarah's ability to maintain her cover while fighting the growing tension of pre-operation nerves. She sat with her usual accounting department colleagues, nodding along to conversations about quarterly projections and office gossip. Her supervisor, Janet Morrison, made enthusiastic toasts about team building and shared experiences. If only she knew, Sarah thought, that the quiet woman from payroll was planning to disappear into the mountains tomorrow to eliminate a high-value target. The resort's dining room buzzed with corporate energy as other companies held their own retreats. Sarah identified at least 3 other groups: a tech startup from Portland, a law firm from Vancouver, and what appeared to be a medical supply company from San Francisco. The diverse mix of guests would provide excellent cover for her movements. Among so many unfamiliar faces, one missing hiker would likely go unnoticed until it was too late for anyone to trace her actions. After dinner, Sarah excused herself early, claiming fatigue from the bus ride. In her room, she began the detailed preparation that would determine whether she lived or died tomorrow. Using her laptop, she accessed weather reports and satellite imagery that helped confirm her planned route. The approach would require crossing a stream, climbing through dense undergrowth, and navigating around a small cliff face before reaching the optimal shooting position. Her modified hiking backpack contained everything she would need. The rifle broke down into components that looked like camping gear to casual observation. The scope appeared to be a spotting scope for bird watching. Ammunition was concealed inside what looked like energy bar wrappers. Every piece of equipment had been carefully chosen to pass inspection if discovered by curious fellow hikers or overzealous resort security. Sarah practiced assembling the rifle in darkness, her hands moving with muscle memory while her mind visualized the shooting position. The target would appear at a window on the compound's second floor for approximately 90 seconds while reviewing weapon samples. One shot would be all she had, miss, and Kozlov would disappear forever while his security team locked down the area. There would be no second chance. Sleep came fitfully despite her preparation. Dreams mixed memories of Afghanistan with images of tomorrow's mission. She saw desert mountains transform into Pacific Northwest peaks, felt the familiar weight of her rifle, and heard the distant sound of helicopter rotors. The old nightmares had returned, but now they felt like preparation rather than haunting. Her subconscious was remembering skills that civilian life had forced into hibernation. Friday morning arrived with clear skies and light winds, perfect conditions for precision shooting. Sarah joined her colleagues for breakfast, forcing herself to eat despite the adrenaline beginning to build in her system. The hiking groups would depart at 1 p.m., giving her a 4-hour window to reach the shooting position, complete the mission, and return before anyone noticed her absence. The timing was tight, but manageable for someone with her training. The advanced hiking group consisted of 8 people, including Sarah and 2 actual outdoor enthusiasts who had pushed for a more challenging route. Group leader Brad Patterson was an experienced guide who had worked at the resort for 5 years. His knowledge of the terrain would be both helpful and dangerous. Helpful for navigating to the general area, dangerous because he would notice if someone disappeared from the group. Sarah's plan was elegantly simple. At approximately 2:45 p.m., she would claim to have twisted her ankle and ask the group to continue without her. She would promise to rest for 30 minutes before carefully making her way back to the resort. Instead, she would circle around through the forest, reach her shooting position, take the shot, and return via a different route. If questioned later, she would claim to have gotten lost on her way back and wandered in circles before finding the trail. The morning activities provided final opportunities to study her fellow hikers and identify potential complications. Brad Patterson was thorough and safety-conscious, but he also respected experienced hikers' ability to make their own decisions. Marketing manager Tom Wright was out of shape and would likely be grateful for any excuse to thin out the group. Administrative assistant Linda Davis was more observant than most, but she was also developing a romantic interest in Patterson that would occupy her attention. During the pre-hike briefing, Patterson outlined the route and safety procedures while Sarah memorized every detail that would affect her operation. The trail would take them within half a mile of her target position, close enough to slip away without arousing immediate suspicion. Radio communication with the resort would be limited due to mountain terrain, providing additional cover for her activities. As the group gathered their gear and prepared to depart, Sarah felt the familiar calm that preceded action. Her heart rate slowed, her vision sharpened, and the background chatter of her colleagues faded into white noise. The transformation was complete. Accountant Sarah Chun was disappearing, replaced by the weapon that 8 years of civilian life hadn't managed to destroy. The hike began with typical corporate retreat energy. Colleagues who rarely left their offices marveled at the mountain scenery while struggling with unfamiliar backpacks and boots. Sarah maintained her position in the middle of the group, helping where appropriate while secretly reviewing her mental map of the terrain ahead. Every step brought her closer to a moment that would determine whether a arms dealer continued spreading death around the world. The trail wound upward through old-growth forest, past streams that would mask any sounds from her eventual shooting position. Patterson pointed out local wildlife and geological features while Sarah noted potential observation posts and escape routes. Her colleagues were too busy with the physical demands of hiking to pay close attention to her movements, exactly as she had hoped. At 2:20 p.m., the group reached a scenic overlook where Patterson called for a rest break. Sarah could see her target compound in the distance, a collection of buildings nestled in a valley that looked innocent from this range. Somewhere in those structures, Viktor Kozlov was preparing to demonstrate weapons that would eventually kill innocent people. The knowledge strengthened her resolve as she prepared for the most critical deception of her mission. She waited until the group began moving again before implementing her plan. A carefully placed step on loose rocks sent her stumbling with a convincing cry of pain. Her ankle twisted just enough to create legitimate discomfort without causing actual injury. The performance was flawless, concern from her colleagues, professional assessment from Patterson, and reluctant agreement that she should rest while the others continued. "I'll be fine," Sarah assured them, sitting on a fallen log while massaging her ankle. "Just give me 30 minutes to rest, and I'll head back slowly. I know the way." Patterson's safety training warred with his respect for adult decision-making. Sarah's calm competence and obvious hiking experience tipped the balance. After reviewing the route back to the resort and extracting promises about radio check-ins, he led the group away while Sarah waved them off with a rueful smile. The moment they disappeared around a bend, Sarah's transformation accelerated. The mild-mannered accountant vanished completely as 8 years of military training reasserted itself. She retrieved her hidden gear, quickly assembled her rifle, and began moving through the forest with the silent efficiency of a predator. Every footstep was calculated, every branch carefully moved to avoid noise or broken twigs that might reveal her passage. The approach route took her along a game trail that paralleled the main path, while remaining concealed from casual observation. Sarah moved like she had in Afghanistan, reading the terrain for threats while maintaining constant awareness of her timeline. She had exactly 90 minutes to reach position, complete the mission, and begin her return journey before Patterson's group reached their turnaround point. The forest grew denser as she descended toward the target area, providing excellent concealment while requiring careful navigation. Sarah's internal GPS guided her through terrain she had studied but never walked, adjusting for obstacles that hadn't appeared on satellite imagery. A fallen tree here, a small ravine there, each requiring quick decisions about the optimal path forward. At 3:15 p.m., Sarah reached her planned shooting position on a ridge overlooking Kozlov's compound. The range was 847 meters, well within her capabilities, but requiring precise calculation of environmental factors. She set up her rifle with practiced efficiency, adjusting for elevation, wind speed, and the slight temperature differential between her position and the target area. Through her scope, the compound revealed details invisible to the naked eye. Security personnel moved in predictable patterns around the perimeter. Vehicles were positioned for quick escape, if necessary. And, in the main building's second-floor window, movement indicated that the weapons demonstration was beginning as scheduled. Sarah controlled her breathing and settled into the shooting position that had become second nature during 2 tours of combat duty. Her finger found the trigger as she began the final countdown to a shot that would end Viktor Kozlov's career in spreading death around the world. In 30 seconds, Justice would travel 847 meters at 2,700 feet per second. The window filled with figures as Kozlov appeared exactly where intelligence had predicted. Sarah's crosshairs found their mark as she began the trigger squeeze that would change everything. But in that moment of perfect stillness before the shot, a sound reached her ears that made her blood freeze. Footsteps. Someone was approaching through the forest behind her. Sarah Chun adjusted her thick-rimmed glasses and glanced at the clock on her desk. Another late night at Morrison & Associates, the mid-sized accounting firm where she had worked for the past 3 years. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as she carefully reviewed the quarterly reports spread across her workspace. To anyone watching, she looked like exactly what she was supposed to be, a quiet, unremarkable accountant who preferred numbers to people. The office building stood 23 stories tall in downtown Seattle, filled with lawyers, consultants, and financial advisors who barely noticed the small Asian woman who always ate lunch alone. Sarah had cultivated this image carefully. She wore conservative business suits, kept her hair in a neat bun, and spoke only when necessary during meetings. Her colleagues saw her as competent but forgettable, the kind of employee who did solid work without making waves. What they didn't know was that Sarah Chun wasn't really an accountant at all. 8 years earlier, Sarah had been Sergeant First Class Chun of the United States Army, one of the most skilled snipers in her unit. She had served 2 tours in Afghanistan, where her steady hands and exceptional eyesight had saved countless lives. Her official record showed commendations for marksmanship and tactical excellence, but the classified details remained locked away in Pentagon files that would never see daylight. The transition to civilian life had been difficult. After her discharge, Sarah struggled to find purpose in a world that seemed impossibly ordinary after years of high-stakes operations. She had tried several jobs before settling into accounting, drawn by the precision and attention to detail that reminded her of calculating wind speed and bullet drop. The work kept her mind occupied while she tried to forget the weight of a rifle scope and the sound of her own heartbeat in the moments before a perfect shot. Her apartment reflected the same careful normalcy as her office persona. The living room held generic furniture and bland artwork, the kind of space that could belong to anyone. But hidden behind a false wall in her bedroom closet, Sarah maintained a different reality. Her old equipment lay carefully preserved, a disassembled M24 sniper weapon system, rangefinders, ballistic calculators, and ghillie suit components. She told herself she kept them for sentimental reasons, but deep down she knew it was something more. On this particular Tuesday evening, Sarah was alone in the office except for the security guard making his rounds. She had volunteered to stay late to finish the Henderson Industries audit, a complex project that required someone with her particular attention to detail. As she worked through the financial statements, her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Package delivery scheduled for Thursday. Confirm receipt capability. Sarah stared at the message, her pulse quickening. She hadn't seen a coded communication in 3 years, not since her handler had assured her that her cover assignment was permanent. The accounting job was supposed to be exactly what it appeared, a normal career for a veteran trying to build a new life. But the message format was unmistakable, following protocols she had memorized during her intelligence training. She deleted the text without responding and tried to return to her work, but concentration proved impossible. The numbers on her screen blurred as memories flooded back. Sand-colored mountains, the smell of gun oil, and the absolute stillness that preceded a perfect shot. Sarah had always known this day might come, but she had hoped it never would. The next morning brought a team meeting about the upcoming Morrison & Associates company retreat. Sarah sat in the conference room, half listening as her supervisor outlined plans for team-building exercises at a mountain resort. Her mind was elsewhere, analyzing the implications of yesterday's message. If her old unit needed her, it meant something had gone seriously wrong. The kind of wrong that required someone with her very specific skills. During lunch, Sarah drove to a coffee shop across town where she had never been before. She ordered a simple black coffee and sat by the window, watching for anything unusual. At exactly 1:15 p.m., a man in a business suit sat down at the table next to hers. He appeared to be reading a newspaper, but Sarah noticed the slight bulge under his jacket and the way his eyes constantly scanned the room. "Weather's supposed to be nice this weekend," he said without looking up from his paper. "Good for hiking," Sarah replied, completing the authentication sequence. The man folded his newspaper and stood up, leaving a manila envelope on his chair. Sarah waited 5 minutes before casually walking past the table and palming the envelope. Back in her car, she examined the contents: travel documents, a brief mission outline, and photographs of 3 individuals. The operation would take place during her company's mountain retreat, using her legitimate business trip as cover. The target was Viktor Kozlov, a Russian arms dealer who had been supplying weapons to terrorist organizations. Intelligence indicated he would be meeting with buyers at a remote compound just 40 miles from the retreat location. Previous attempts to capture Kozlov had failed, and he had grown increasingly paranoid about his security. The mission required someone who could get close without raising suspicion, someone with both the skills and the cover identity to complete an impossible shot. Sarah studied Kozlov's photograph, memorizing his features. She had heard whispers about him during her active duty years, a man who sold death to the highest bidder without regard for the consequences. The intelligence report included details about his recent sales to groups responsible for attacks on American civilians. This wasn't just another military target. This was someone who deserved everything he had coming. The retreat location was perfect for the operation. The mountain resort sat in a valley surrounded by elevated positions that offered clear sight lines to the compound. Sarah would need to separate herself from her colleagues without arousing suspicion, take the shot, and return before anyone noticed her absence. The timing would be critical. She would have perhaps a 4-hour window during the afternoon hiking activities. That evening, Sarah visited a storage unit she maintained across town. Inside, wrapped in careful layers of protective material, was a custom rifle she had acquired through private channels. The weapon was untraceable, built from components that couldn't be linked to any official records. She had told herself it was for sport shooting, but the truth was more complicated. Some habits die hard, and some skills demand to be maintained. She spent 2 hours cleaning and checking the rifle, her hands moving with muscle memory that 8 years of civilian life hadn't erased. The weapon felt familiar in her grip, like greeting an old friend. Sarah adjusted the scope and verified the action, making sure everything was perfect. When lives depended on a single shot, there was no room for equipment failure. The mission briefing mentioned that Kozlov traveled with a security team of former Spetsnaz operators, making a traditional assault impossible. The compound was heavily fortified, with multiple escape routes and early warning systems. Only a long-range precision shot from an unexpected direction could succeed. Sarah would be alone, with no backup and no extraction plan beyond her own ability to disappear back into her cover identity. As she drove home, Sarah reflected on the irony of her situation. For 3 years, she had played the role of a quiet accountant so convincingly that she had almost convinced herself. The transformation back to her true self felt both natural and terrifying. She was about to risk everything she had built for a mission that officially didn't exist, against a target whose death would save lives, but leave no trace in any history book. Her apartment felt different when she returned, as if seeing it through the eyes of someone preparing for war. The generic furniture and bland decorations seemed like props in a play she had been performing without realizing it. Tomorrow would begin a careful balancing act, maintaining her cover while preparing for an operation that would test skills she had tried to forget. Sarah made a simple dinner and reviewed the retreat itinerary one more time. The hiking activity was scheduled for Friday afternoon, with participants divided into groups based on experience level. She had already volunteered for the advanced group, which would venture furthest from the main resort. The distance would provide the separation she needed while maintaining plausible deniability about her whereabouts. The weather forecast showed clear skies with minimal wind, perfect conditions for precision shooting. Sarah had already calculated the range and elevation adjustments needed for the shot. At 847 meters, it would be challenging, but well within her capabilities. The real difficulty would be the infiltration and exfiltration, moving through terrain while carrying a rifle without being detected by either her colleagues or Kozlov's security team. She laid out her hiking clothes and gear, making sure everything appeared normal while concealing the modifications she would need. A hiking backpack with hidden compartments, boots with non-standard treads, and clothing that could be quickly altered to change her silhouette. Every detail mattered when the margin for error was zero. As Sarah prepared for bed, she performed the mental exercises she had learned during sniper training. Visualization techniques that would help her remain calm under pressure, breathing patterns that would steady her hands when the moment came. The familiar routine brought a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. Tomorrow would begin the most dangerous performance of her life. But tonight she was simply a soldier preparing for battle. The last thing she did before sleep was check the locks on her apartment doors and windows. Old habits never truly disappear, and Sarah had learned long ago that survival depends on attention to details that others overlook. In 12 hours, she would begin the delicate process of becoming someone else while remaining exactly who she had always been. Her dreams that night were filled with mountain winds, and the weight of a rifle scope pressed against her eye. In the distance, a target waited, unaware that death was already calculating the angles. Sarah Chun slept peacefully for the first time in 3 years, knowing that tomorrow would bring clarity to a life that had been suspended between two worlds for too long. The morning alarm felt different, carrying the weight of purpose that had been missing from her daily routine. Sarah rose with the practiced efficiency of someone who understood that every action from this point forward would matter. She was no longer just an accountant heading to a company retreat. She was a weapon being deployed against a target who had escaped justice for too long. The transformation had begun, even though no one around her would notice anything unusual about Sarah Chun adjusting her glasses and heading out to catch her ride to the mountains. They would see what they had always seen, a quiet woman who preferred numbers to people. They had no idea that the person sitting beside them on the bus was calculating distances, wind patterns, and the precise timing needed to change the world with a single shot.